Okay. Thank you, Lucy. Good afternoon to everyone. So first of all, I want to thank, of course, the staff of the University of Liverpool, Lucy Timbrell, the organizer, that gave me this opportunity to be virtually here with you today. So for the ones who don't know me, so I think most of you, so I am Davide Delpiano. I am a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Ferrara. I just concluded my PhD at the beginning of this year in a lockdown from my apartment, and this, unfortunately, this is what I'm gonna do today. Also, hoping that we can meet in person, maybe in a short time at some conferences. So my studies focus on the lithic technology of the Middle Paleolithic, especially the end of the Middle Paleolithic and the transition to the Upper Paleolithic in Central Southern Europe, mostly in the Alpine region, so north and south of the Alps. I study the ways in which mainly Neanderthals designed and manufactured everyday tools. So the stone tools with which they carried the subsistence activities, being hunter-gatherer societies, so mainly hunting activities and domestic activities. And I will talk about this topic by bringing some specific cases that include stone tool analysis carried out with different integrated methods. So sometimes virtual digital methods aimed at answering the same large questions. Okay, so a recurrent question concerning Neanderthals, beside their discussed disappearance, is precisely the variability of the material culture. So, and the technological lithic production, of course, since lithic tools represent, of course, the most common artifact that we are able to find in such ancient context. So Neanderthal material culture was supposed to be flat during time, especially if we compared to the package of innovation brought by Homo sapiens in Europe from Africa and Near East, such as bone tools, varietal and mobile art, composite weapons. However, this picture of a Neanderthal man unable to self-innovate has luckily changed in the past years. And due to several studies, and we can now say that Neanderthal was a human species perfectly adapted to its environment. So they were able to occupy huge areas, regions during Pleistocene ice ages. So consequently, they lived in different environments, and this could be one reason for the variable culture. But we also know that thanks to the amazing step forward made by paleogeneticists, that Neanderthals were also characterized by a certain genetic diversity, so which results in distinct human groups that hypothetically could develop different cultures, invent or reinvent objects, and also develop innovations. Innovations that may have caused also by the meeting with other human species, such as anatomically modern humans, and so processes of external acculturation. So in the last part of the Middle Paleolithic, we see an increase of technocultural diversity in Europe. Neanderthals manufactured their tools mainly through debitage, that is knapping of a core using different methods, producing flakes, blades, points, and sometimes retouching them into scrapers, denticulated tools, back knives, retouch points. But in some parts of Europe, they still manufactured bifacial tools by façonnage, so directly shaping row blanks in order to produce leaf points or end axes or cleavers. And as you know, the diffusion of some technologies and typical tools serve to the archaeologist to distinguish very different cultural complexes. So among them, there are the Mousterian of Acheulean tradition, the Mousterian with bifacial tools, the Chimessen group with baked bifacial chimessers, the Vasconian, where the Mousterian is the widest cultural expression of Neanderthal. However, subdivided itself in many technocomplexes, characterized by different mapping technologies. So the Levallois, the Discoid, the Kina, the blade technology, and a different set of tools, of course. So this diversity could be synchronic or diachronic, with shift and substitutions between technocomplexes also in the same site. So in this regard, I can show the example of Grotta di Fumane. That is one of the main sites where I had the opportunity to work in Italy with the University of Ferrara under the direction of Professor Marco Peresani. And this is important concerning technological shifts internal to the Mousterian culture. So Fumane is a cave site located in the Italian Pre-Alps, Veneto region, near to the Garda Lake. And it's an important archive of information and data concerning the human peopling and also the relationship with the local environment during the Upper Pleistocene. In particular, Fumane records the occupation by Homo neanderthalensis and its replacement by Homo sapiens that in this region occurred more or less 44 to 43,000 years ago. The lower part of the stratigraphy, is several meters of deposit, records the recurrent occupation of Neanderthals between more than 100,000 years ago until 43,000 years. These occur through different climatic phases, with moments of short occupations followed by more intense occupations at the top. There are several evidences of human activities, such as napping, lighting of fires. There are fireplaces, like this specimen, partially structurated and delimited by stones. Then there's butchering of ungulates, like red deer, roe deer, giant deer, aurochs, ibex, but also bears and birds, especially birds that Neanderthals used also for the production of ornaments, of jewelry. We found traces of the use of lithic tools, some cut marks, in the claw phalanxes and in the wings bones of many big raptors that are consistent with the extraction of feathers and talons that were probably used for ornaments, like many ethnographic recent examples seem also to suggest. Then Fumane record the replacement of Neanderthals by anatomically modern humans, so whose frequentation starts around 43,000 years ago with the transitional technocomplex of Lucian, and then with the proto-orignation, where intense occupation has been also recognized. Fumane is particularly known in this phase for the rich production in portable art and again jewelry. So sapiens, however, prefer the use of pigments, such as the painted stones of the so-called wizard. This figure, half human and half beast. You see the horns. That with 40 or 41,000 years, I think it is still the most ancient human representation in Europe. And then they use marine shells, perforated and used as pendants. And just before the replacement by anatomically modern humans, Neanderthals show a variability in their technological substrate. So the way of netting the cores in order to produce blanks and tools. The late Mousterian attests an alternation in the technical behavior in a few thousand years. So we are in the marine isotopic stage 3 here, in the MIS 3, around 50,000, 44,000 years ago. And we see that the Fumane Neanderthals shift from the preferential adoption of Levallois technology, recurrent unipolar method, to the almost exclusive use of a Discoid mapping method during similar environmental conditions. Then again, they shift to unipolar Levallois and then to centripetal Levallois. These changes are sometimes evident in sublayers also, recording preserved occupation surfaces, trampling surfaces, possible thanks to the exceptional preservation of the cave deposit. That is, especially in the atrial area of the cave, not in the inner part, the resolution we can have in the reconstruction of human occupation is very high. We find stratifications of dark paleo surfaces alternating with lighter non-occupied layers that mark cold periods. And the fireplaces themselves are sometimes stratified with lighter also the preservation you see in of ashes and micro charcoals, and sometimes also at the bottom you can see the reddish thermo-altered part. We said that the two main mapping technologies in these phases are Levallois and the Discoid. So unipolar Levallois is mostly used in the A10 and the A11 layers. This technology is here applied to cores for the production of flakes, especially thin, regularly shaped, elongated flakes from cores that are characterized by a recurrent production. So with the set of Levallois blends detached before a re-preparation of the core and of the core convexities also is needed to other production stages. The two surfaces are usually hierarchized. So one is the striking platform and the other one is the netting surface. And Discoid production instead is very common in A9 layer, is characterized by the unifacial or bifacial netting of cores, but the two surfaces are not hierarchized. So the main production can take place both on one and on the other surfaces. And the netting pattern is often centripetal on the periphery, and a central convexity is maintained in this way. And the resulted products are less elongated and thicker flakes, often bearing a flaking or natural back opposed to a cutting edge or to a point. Also beside a Kumbiwa type flakes also that are derived from the netting of flake cores. And A9 layers preserve some fossilized pictures of Neanderthal behavior, such as these bones of a bird wing that are still in anatomic connection. And also talking about Discoid napping, this lithic concentration, that is the remains of a napping sequence, of a napping of a flint block that was found as it was abandoned, so with still accumulated pieces. These artifacts forming this concentration were reassembled. It was possible to reassemble it, and as previously thought, they recomposed a block of flint, so made up of about 25 elements, including the core, and almost completely rebuilt, and attesting at Discoid the chain operatoire that here I'm going to describe. And maybe you know that multiple refitting, despite the wide informative potential on the netting activities, are very difficult to handle and to analyze because they're not stable. There is the danger to damage or to break them. Even recording precise morphometrical data could be very tricky. So we tried an alternative approach, that is the virtual analysis of the refitting, making use of the 3D models. So we obtain 3D models with high quality structure light scanner, thanks to the collaboration with the Neanderthal Museum in Germany. So the Brightline scanner that we used was works with the structure light, which is projected on the object, and the two digital cameras from different angulations. So a point cloud is calculated based on this geometry of the sensor system, and the phase images acquired by the camera. To create a three-dimensional model, the scanner takes a series of shots from different angles. Those shots can be aligned automatically by the software itself using a turntable like this. And this is a very effective device. So for other studies, I experienced also the use of other techniques that could also be okay for lithic artifacts, such as less expensive structured light scanner or manual portable scanner, or also photogrammetry. And what can I say is the acquisition technique depends on the research objective. So if you want a detailed accuracy, you need a high quality scanner. If it's enough a broadly shape for geometric morphometrics, so a portable, very fast scanner could be okay in order to acquire many pieces in a short time, of course. And but if you're searching, for example, for naturalistic rendering, for archiving, for visualization, or online sharing, maybe photogrammetry is the best solution, of course. So you can see that the obtained model is quite good from this example. We use different open source software to post-process the models that were compressed and deprived of the texture. So I then use Blender, this open source software, in order to refit the single scan on a virtual environment, because Blender gives the possibility to handle many 3D models at the same time. So on all this software, the refitting was finally analyzed. The ease of interaction also with the virtually refitted model without problems of weight, gravity, agility, permitted to analyze and characterize better the desired features of the refitting. So the accurate analysis carried in parallel with the traditional approach and the approach allows to recognize many unrecorded attachments, at least more than 60 attachments in front of more or less 24, 25 flakes repeated. So through direct sequential relationships that were ordered in a sort of Harris diagram, you see, a sort of Harris matrix, because it's explaining all the chain operatoire. And in accordance with these negatives, the three-dimensional gaps also, and the technical stigmata, we distinguish 10 stages of the chain operatoire. Here outlined on the right, with the Knapping that is alternating on the two main surfaces, so the surface A and the surface B, in a discoid concept, as we'll see now. So these are the two surfaces, and the Knapping strictly follows the criteria known for the Discoid method. So there's an alternation of chordal and centripetal strikes that are needed for the management of the core convexities. There's a variability of the core exploitation, even if the strikes were all given from the same peripheral edge. So there is never the intention to open different striking platforms. And these very clear productive concepts remain all the same all along the sequence. But in front of concepts that are clear and well applied, we observe many netting errors. So in flakes, overshoot flakes, or also fragmentations in area where percussions were strangely insisted. So these errors usually denote low care, low precision, and even if at the end the surfaces are always adjusted through the detachment of some reparatory flakes like this one. So there's several errors affect the productivity of the sequence. That is, for reason is extremely low, and we know that objectives are partially reached because some negatives and 3D voids in the refitting delineate classic and successful Discoid artifacts that were probably for this reason picked up, so probably used and abandoned in another place. And the shape and the measurements also of these pieces were partially reconstructed thanks in this way, thanks to the 3D approach you see in these pictures. So in particular, as you see, the 3D model of the refitting. Okay. We can investigate with the 3D approach parts that are usually inaccessible with the traditional method. So the 3D manipulation make possible to create a cross-section, for example, of the refitting that show clearly the lacking pieces or also the napping pattern of the core. You see the core is perfectly biconvex at the end, but was not like that at the beginning with the surface B that was, as you see, quite flat. So here a targeted napping of mainly the Bordon flakes concur to highlight this central convexity. And this technical behavior permitted Napper to apply a bifacial Discoid reduction method. So to exploit not only this surface, but also this one in a bifacial Discoid method, increasing in this way the versatility and also the potential productivity of the entire sequence. So organizing the production on two surfaces instead of one, in a turning centripetal and continuous and recurrent pattern. So thanks to this combined virtual and classic approaches, we draw a series of conclusions about the informative potential of the Discoid refitting in Grotta di Fumane. The pebble was a sort of a second choice raw material, so was available locally, was collected in the small stream in proximity of the site. All the actions were carried out within the site, probably in some minutes. The concentration represents a lithic workshop waste, so a waste, but probably not in a natural deposition, because we know that spatial dispersion that we observe in experimental mapping activities is very different. There's wider dispersion of large pieces and also debris. So on the contrary, here this find was accumulating in very few centimeters. So we think that Napper worked on a support, probably, for example, skin, that it cleaned up in this place, and this place was a waste area external to the fireplaces. So many of the technical actions were probably planned. The concepts are very, very clear and standardized, but despite the clear concept, there's an approximation of the physical gestures. So there's a low care or skill, as we saw. So probably the Napper's level of expertise wasn't very high, and this is the reason of a low productivity, of course. So assuming we advance the hypothesis that the napping sequence is the work of an apprentice, possibly led by a teacher, because we see that the theoretical knowledge on one hand is broad, but this is not consistent with the skill that is put into practice. That is instead is quite low. And so some remarks also on our virtual approach. The use of 3D permitted a series of advantages and especially solved some issues. First of all, the ease of handling was essential to detect the technological features, simplifying this way the traditional analysis. The level of interaction on a virtual support is very high, and the object can undergo unlimited manipulations. It's possible to use artificial light, take cross sections, special filters, morphological computations, like including angles, volumes. In this way, it's possible also to reach inaccessible data, such as the reconstruction of the laking products. Then working on the virtual, of course, preserve the original. And finally, this is the perfect support, of course, to be disseminated. So both on scientific papers, for special lectures and lessons, but mostly, of course, on the web through free online platforms like a Sketchfab, for example. So you know that sharing of freely open data could be an input to generate content, generate discussions. That is, of course, as you know, the base of the scientific progress. And this remarkable example is useful also to us in order to partially change our topic of discussion. So through this reduction sequence, we saw which were the technological objectives of the Discoid production in A9 layer in Fumane. So these are mainly the bottom products, core edge removal flakes, and pseudo-leveler points that are very efficient tools since they're provided of a netting back opposed to a point or a cutting edge. Neanderthals are known to utilize many retouched but also unretouched flakes for their daily activities. So next to these tools, unretouched back tools, we began to find lately many important flakes characterized by retouching on the back. So as you see from these models, some technical interventions that are aimed to create or modify the back. So retouch and thinning also. These are very rare tools in the European Middle Paleolithic, and therefore some questions emerge. So which are the functions, for example? Or why did Neanderthals from Fumane carry this technical investment here, where many back artifacts were produced with a natural or necked back, so without the need to produce retouched back tools. And so in this regard, it's necessary to put in the technical object back at the center of the debate. So the technological product from the very first flake directly responds to human needs and is a way to overcome the nature-imposed limits and also the deficiencies of the human body that is unable to efficiently perform the basic subsistence activities. This is true since the first flake was produced, so more than 3 million years ago. This first flake for its use requires a cutting part and a part dedicated to the manual grasping. So we can say that this is a first human-made knife. And the backed artifact, then having an ergonomic part that is the back that is prehensile and opposed to the cutting edge, includes functional and ergonomic features related to handheld knives. And this could be improved through preparations of retouching, recording in this way progress, of course, and also innovations. In fact, the technological progress, according to the thought of Gilbert Simondon, that is a philosopher of technology, is recorded in two possible ways. So the first is through saturation of the object, that is the stabilization of the scheme and thus the standardization of the object. And the second is the remodulation through invention or innovation. And this is very important when applied to back tools, since these innovations the production of retouched back artifacts and standardized back artifacts have been sometimes connected to important evolutionary steps, such as systematic hefting, projectile technologies, or also the capacity of planning and problem solving through technique. So these behaviors occurred mainly in the African Middle Stone Age, or the transition between the Middle and the Upper Paleolithic in Europe. So you see, in a crucial phase for the emergence of modern behavior. So this is why we decided to analyze these back tools from Fumane with different integrated approaches, starting from the techno-functional method, since it aims to recompose the manufacturing and the use schemes of the tool, okay, through its destructuration in passive and active techno-functional units. At first, the information on technological, morphological, and morphometric attributes were manually recorded. So attributes that we know that influence the functionality of the object, such as the angle of the cutting edge, the shape of the edge, the bevel, recorded in section, that is the dihedral formed by the cutting edge, by the upper and the lower surfaces, whose conformation determines the type of contact between the tool and the transformed material, so affecting in this way the functionality of the cutting edge. Then we also use the 3D scans for this analysis also, since many parameters of interest, like angles and bevels, were possible to see in cross-section. So in this case, 3D was used for qualitative analysis, but also for quantitative analysis, such as the statistical management of the shape. So for 3D geometric morphometrics, we use the software AGMT3D, that is it allows easy semi-automatic shape analysis that is already tested for Lithic tools. And in the software, the semi-Landran positioning is automatic and is performed with a grid of parallel and meridians. Then this is followed by a multivariate statistical analysis based on the principal component analysis, the PCA. So the study on back tools was carried with the crossing of different methodologies. So technological analysis, such as work step analysis, was useful to reconstruct the stages of manufacturing of the tool biographies, the use life of the most complex tools. Techno-functional and morphological analysis, with we have seen the use of 3D and statistical shape analysis, geometric morphometrics. Then experimental activities of replication and use of back tools were performed in order to verify the functionality and also the techniques employed for the retouching of the back. And also experimentations were useful to validate the usual analysis that were carried on part of the material. And then the last step was the whole data was finally embedded in the chronocultural and ecological context known for these human occupations, of course. So the modification, the deliberate modification of the original blank occurs as a result of a wide range of technical interventions, which are designed to create or refine a thick and burnt portion of the blank. So first of all, we isolated the pieces where the back is completely or partially retouched, completely prepared by means of direct, abrupt retouching, or where the existing mapping back is regularized or accommodated with a partial retouch that is often localized where a sharp portion of the back is present. So these typical back tools were retouched with different techniques. We recognized the direct free-handed percussion, that the bipolar percussion with the pieces leaning on an angle that produce bipolar scars, in this example. More rarely, the back is created only with abrasion, that is instead used most of the time to regularize previous retouching. Then we selected pieces bearing different kind of technical interventions of the back, like the thinning, both ventral and also dorsal thinning, or sometimes also minor intervention like tiny detachment. This ventral thinning modified the thickness and the regularity of the profile of the tools. These detachments on the pieces serve to remove the typical sinuosity of the upper edge of the tools, and in this way to regularize the thickness of the pieces. Instead, the minor interventions were selected since they required further studies in order to establish whether they are the result of punctual technical arrangements, the result of functional uses of the back, or of post-depositional alteration, of course. So the pieces are mainly the Borton flakes, as I said, or pseudo-level points obtained from Discoid core reduction, applied in some cases to core on flakes. And these blanks were obtained almost always from advanced stage in the core reduction, since the cortical surfaces are very, very rare, and the tools are on average quite small, so between 3 and 4 centimeters. So the use-wear analysis was performed by applying both low and high power approaches. With the first, it was possible to identify edge damage associated to use, like scars, edge rounding, microchipping, whose location and distribution allow the reconstruction of the motion and, of course, determine the hardness of the work material. Such as, for example, the scars with feather or step determinations with oblique and transversal orientation patterns are associated to medium and a high degree of edge rounding. And in these cases, these traces are diagnostic of cutting or scraping activities of soft to medium materials. High power analysis was tried, but the sample unfortunately suffered from post-depositional surface patination. So this patina prevented the identification and interpretation of the microwear. Then an experimental protocol was developed based on the replication and use of analogous tools. So core edge removal flakes, pseudo-level points, again, that were used both raw and after the back retouch and modifications according to the identified techniques. So the experimentations include processing of both animal and vegetal materials, tissues with different motions. So the cutting of meat, tendons, fresh hide, dry hide. Occasionally, transversal gestures were performed to remove the smallest meat residues from the bones. Tools proved to be highly efficient in these tasks throughout the entire process, you can say, despite a lowering in the grip efficiency caused by the meat residues, the residues of the meat that adhere over the prehensive area, make the pieces slippery to handle. So during the experiment, tools were handled free-handedly, with the exception of two wooden artifacts. The first using by a split arrangement, so split heft, like you can see here, while the second one by using the juxtaposed hefting solution. So the hefted tools were used for different cutting activities after partial regularization of the back. And during the use, the contact with the handle creates different kind of scars on the stone tools. So macroscopically, on the free-handed pieces, we saw edge rounding on the back, especially on the retouched backs, that finds correspondence in the archaeological pieces and could be related to the contact between the hand and the greasy materials. Okay. So, okay, I can go on. Yeah, perfect. So the comparison between experimental and archaeological samples confirm the propensity of these tools to perform a variety of activities on soft and medium hardness material. So scraping was used almost exclusively on materials of medium hardness. Cutting was mostly performed on soft materials. Particularly important is the correspondence with the working of animal tissues like skins and tendons. The pieces were probably used mainly in the processing of hunted carcasses, so from the skinning to the butchering, and only to a lesser extent for hide processing and woody plant processing. Therefore, our experiments demonstrate how a retouched back can increase the tool effectiveness. For example, there's an improvement in the gripping potential, especially during activities where hands get covered in greasy and fatty matter. So, as seen during the meat and tendons processing. So, retouch is useful for the gripping potential, but an improvement of manual prehension is noticed because it facilitates the retouch, facilitates the pushing movement where too thin, sharp, or irregular edge did not allow direct gripping. So in this sense, also simple blunting through abrasion can be useful to protect fingers on organic streams from the contact with the lithic edge. But when these tools are particularly efficient. So when the blunting is on the mesial or the distal portion of the tool, the accommodation of the finger implies the precision manual grasping. So like in these pictures, the first one, that are in accordance with the usual analysis and also in accordance with the size of tools that are quite small, and confirm the ability of Neanderthals to perform precision tasks, precision works, that has been attested also recently by studies based on hand muscles. So this manual prehension is used when moderate strength is required, and on the contrary, in the tasks that require greater strength and a very firm grip, the prehensive scheme changes, as we see in the second pictures, with no fingers on the back and not requiring, in most cases, specific intervention on the back. So it is important to cross-check this data also on the convex and pointed part and protrusions that are in the cutting edges, that is often present on the cutting edge, that is very suitable for precision activities like the cutting of tendons, the cutting of skin. And finally, the back reworking can adapt different types of handles. So avoiding standardized patterns in favor of specific modifications according to the tool morphology and objectives. So in fact, I can say that we are dealing mostly with curated tools with long lives, and in a couple of cases, also the use of a handle is attested by useware. So here is one of the most complex tools, a transverse scraper with a fracture on the left edge that is recycled after this breakage. And then on the active edge here, scraping activity with transverse motion has been identified, so with this direction. On the left fracture, small and medium scars, rectangular scars being associated to a heft. So on the base also, there is a bifacial preparation, bifacial working. So this was probably useful to configure the tool for the heft. The heft has been probably has to be inserted in this way with a split arrangement covering the thinner left part of the tool, while the right edge was thicker, much thicker, was not included probably in the hefting, but here heavy abrasions affect both the upper and the lower edges of the tool. So after the reconstruction of these use schemes, this part was probably involved in a fixing and arranging of the heft. So the abrasions served probably to protect organic streams, as it showed in the on the right. So this is the way probably this tool was used. So why the manufacturing of retouchback tools took place here in Cumana in a Discoid technological system, where we saw that the production of naturally or napped-backed stone tool is very common. So these particular tools are characterized by general long life, also documented by the use of exotic raw material or Kumbiwa type technology that is generally associated here to the important side of semi-local raw materials in regional context. Furthermore, we see from the PCA built on the 3D shapes of the unretouched and retouched back tools that there is no selection of specific types of shapes. The retouched back tools are very, very similar to the unretouched one. So these tools were probably manufactured in order to respond to specific needs emerged during daily or seasonal activities, seasonal mobility, I can say. So where they were only abandoned in a campsite like Cumana. There is no fixed rule. So the emergence of this technique is related to improve, for an instant use, the prehensive and functional effectiveness of these versatile and multifunctional tools. In conclusion, we can say that many ecological and economic reasons also seems to be at the basis of the production of retouched back tools in Cumana. So this is an important technical investment with curated tools with long lives. It can be assumed that some of these implements belong to the mobile toolkit. Then they are precision tools, elaborated tools with many different prehension schemes, mainly manually held, but also hefted, as we saw. And we can underline also that the hefting in this case is not required because we are not dealing with projectiles, but substantially with knives. So hefting it serves for improving the effectiveness. And in some, they are multifunctional, versatile, but also efficient tools, representing an important innovation that, however, had to be already part of the Neanderthal repertoire, because we know that these kind of tools are known in the Middle Palaeolithic, even if rare. So there are some isolated and doubtful cases in more ancient phases, like from MIS 5 and 7, but they became more common from MIS-free. So from 50,000 years ago, they became much more common, especially in southwestern France, where they are more standardized. They are built on unipolar elongated blanks associated to MTA technocomplex, but they are also found in some open-air sites, along with the Discoid technology, more or less 50, 45,000 years ago. Fumane assemblage with a date of at least 48,000 years ago is a late but not final Mysterian, and can be placed also in this phase. And considering the variety of techniques and use patterns, we are dealing with a fully acquired knowledge that could represent an independent Neanderthal innovation, at least concerning Paleolithic Europe, of course. So at the current state of research, this behavior seems to be linked to strictly functional and ecological reasons. So if these tools could represent a cultural marker, it's difficult to say. In Fumane, we don't find a standardization in technology, morphology, or function, but instead an acquired knowledge that was applied when needed. But a different, very different behavior has been recognized in MTA Lithic assemblage, La Rochette site, that I had the opportunity to see in France during my PhD. Here, unipolar netting was employed to produce laminar elongated blanks with symmetrical cross-section. Can you see here, for example? So here the blunting of one edge is needed to allow manual handling and the use of a knife. So the retouch back is also here a tactic aimed at avoiding invested time and energy for the production of a handle, but to manually handle these tools. However, the type of retouching is also standardized, as well as the functional edge, the functional angle, the bevel, the techno-functional scheme. Here we find a strong standardization. And this standardization, together with the constant presence in recurrent and coeval regional contexts that are localized in southwestern France, makes us think about the existence of conceptual schemes. That is the opposite of the variability seen in the back tools of Fumane. So for these reasons, there is the hypothesis that this recurrent concept of MTA back knives could be related also to cultural elements, differently of Fumane's tools. So what we mainly saw during this presentation was strictly applied to lithic assemblages and lithic tools, even if, as you know, the further step is to try to build a synthesis on contextual data, such as the subsystem strategies, final assemblages, environmental data, in order to understand the ecological niche, the mobility patterns, and all the external impulses of the human groups that have a strong influence on the lithic production and the stalled tool manufacturing. And the very last example that I bring to your attention, we can see exactly this process of tool manufacturing following an environmental adaptation. So as I cited the Kyle-Messer group of technocomplexes at the beginning, it was common in Central Europe during late Middle Paleolithic. Here, the back knives are represented by the very typical bifacial tools, the eponymous Kyle-Messer. This tool is actually defined by the presence of a base, back, a cutting edge, possibly a point. And although its variability is very well known also. And by analyzing the Kyle-Messers of one of the most remarkable sites, Cesefes Grotte, that I had also the opportunity to see during my PhD, it was possible to find a pattern in the tool's reduction stages. So with a change in the techno-functional schemes following the tool's reduction and resharpening, as you see on the right. So, and this is also, it was also dependent on the initial type of the raw blank. in these tools, the bifacial retouch is the element that discriminates the kind methods from the other backed artifacts. So bifacial retouch permits a longer use life because the potentiality of resharpening is higher. It permits multifunctionality by remodulation of the use schemes. And finally, it permits also high versatility that is attested by core tools. So those blanks are both tools in themselves and also cores from where to detach small flakes, useful for more precise activities, more precision tasks. So the result is a blank that is very well suitable for example, for personal portable toolkit. Moreover, the analogy between techno-functional features suggested a possible process of imitation between these bifacial knives and the unifacial knives manufactured on flakes. With the first, the bifacial tools, representing the strategic version of the second. And Kynmesser is thus an ecological guide fossil, being a versatile tool that is very well adapted to constrained situations related to patterns of frequent mobility. So they regularly emerge with nomadic seasonal occupation with cold climates characterized by the mammoth steppe environment, and probably started within the first cooling episode of marine isotopy stage 5. So Western refuge areas were probably occupied then during MIS4 with the colder climate of MIS4 before the reoccupation of Central Europe in MIS3. So for the coastal presence in demanding environments, we can hypothesize that the first conception and production of the Kynmesser could have derived from ecological adaptation. So the aim was probably to manufacture a highly potential, multifunctional back knife carried within the personal toolkit of the hunter-gatherer. So later in time, these tools could have also become a cultural symbol in culturally and technologically fragmented late Middle Paleolithic Europe. It was useful also to tracing migration processes and population dynamics between Europe and Central Asia and Siberia, where they have also been found. So, concluding, I hope this roundup of examples gave you an idea of how integrated approaches, including digital virtual approaches, applied to the study of lithic artifacts or lithic core reductions could provide further information on the technical behavior and on the strategies of hunter-gatherer societies, in this case, Neanderthal human groups. We explored the Neanderthal world and we saw that he was actually smart, so he modulated his behavior and strategies, and of course his tools based on environmental constraints. This is how he succeeded to live in Ice Age Europe for more than 200,000 years by ecological adaptation to the landscape. He was precise and accurate. So he manufactured effective tools and he improved them to increase and maximize their potentialities. It was innovative since modern. He knew acting technologies, inventing some kind of tools, and we can say it was also flexible since some question maybe was also flexible. And this flexibility was possibly also related to ethnic or genetic variety. He was already interbreeding with modern humans in some parts of Eastern Europe, also Near East, Central Asia. So admixtures and replacements represent the beginning of this ecological, cultural, and demographic shift also between middle and upper Paleolithic in Europe, and also concur to shape our modern behavior. Now I finished, so I can we can pass to your questions. I think because I've seen that there are a lot of questions.
Yes, thank you, David. That was very, very interesting. Do you want to stop sharing your screen?
Okay. Yeah.
And then we can go on to the question.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, the questions are in the chat. The first question is, have you carried out any associated knapping experiments to attest to the skill level of the maker of the study Discoid core?
No. No, we just record the productivity, the errors, the fragmentations, the technical stigmata that we can saw from the negatives and from the actual pieces that we have in the refitting. So we just compare these very well-known conceptual schemes to the very low care of some technical behaviors. I showed some mapping errors, very hinged flakes, overshoot flakes, but also many fragmentations. I couldn't show, but many fragmentations in the area of the refitting of the core that were very strangely insisted in those places. So we just did this. No associated mapping experiments in that case.
The next question. I was just wondering how the grips varied between the backed and non-backed tools. Was it purely the amount of force able to be applied that changed, or did the way the tools were held change?
So yeah, actually, in some kind of activities, we found that the grip was better with the retouching of the back. So a part of the amount of force, of course, that we were able to put into practice, that was higher because of the blunting of the edge. When we were dealing with the butchering of carcasses, so with the fatty, greasy matter, with the greasy, with greasy matter, the retouched back allow us to improve also the grip. So the grip of the manual handling of the so the contact between the finger and the back and the back edge. So in the non-retouched pieces, probably the non-retouched pieces were more slippery to handle with in these specific activities.
Given the evidence for wood/plant working and the very small size of the backed objects being used, what do you think they were using them for?
That's a very nice and difficult question. We tried to use these tools also to cut dry wood in order to configure to build the heft, but they were not so useful for this, not so effective for this. So we think probably soaked woody plants were mostly processed instead of dry woody plants. So I think soaked wood and small vegetal, small woody and soaked plants, I think.
The evidence for potential teaching/learning based on the refitted Discoid core is really fascinating. Is there any other indicator of this from the rest of the assemblage, perhaps on cores or other refit sequences?
Unfortunately, we had the lucky of this fossilized picture of Neanderthal behavior with this refitting, but in the rest of the A9 layer, so it's called the assemblage, we have a lot of material, and we don't have we have a lot of different behaviors, but it's difficult not having many refitting apart of this to advance such other hypotheses, because of course we had a lot of knapping errors, cores with or without errors, but only with the last stages of knapping in the in the residual core. It's difficult to say, and since we are dealing with a palimpsest in most of cases, so especially in the inner part of the cave, it's difficult to recognize other specific technical behavior apart from this one. So we have to probably quantitatively see the amount of errors of the first choice product, you can say, of negative errors in the course, and then we can say something. But at the actual stage of the study, I cannot say more, unfortunately.
Okay, I think that's all the questions, so I guess we'll leave it there. Thank you very much, David. That was a very, very interesting talk, and thank you everybody for joining today, and we'll see you next week.
So thank you.
Thank you
to everyone.